Can anyone kindly confirm whether they can see the screen, also hear my audio, and see my face clearly? Quickly in the chat box. All right, perfect. That's good to know. So we're gonna start off from where we left. Our last class had a pretty good discussion on what? We discussed the utilities and we were introduced into what system softwares are. But we saw that there are basically 8 to 9 sort of different utility softwares which the examiner expects us to know, right? And we need to basically understand the features of each of those what do we call utility softwares, and we're going to understand how it works and all that stuff, right? So we're going to start off with the same discussion. Yesterday we ended it over antivirus, and inshallah today we're going to start off with the second one, which would be one of these. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. One of these eight, right? So we're going to start off with the most important one, and perhaps the one which the examiner loves testing a lot. Like this specific utility tool is something I must say examiner would again and again wish to ask in your exams. And for that reason, I would recommend that you guys pay your attention. Are we required to understand only why they work or also how? No, you are required to understand the general features, what they do, and if there is an element of how they work, like for instance, the one which I'm discussing right now, the specific utility sort which I would be just introducing, that does require you to know how it works too. But generally, like for an antivirus, like I would definitely say that you should be aware of how it works too. Like for antivirus, you should be aware of how it basically checks all the files and then it carries out heuristic checking. And like if a file is detected, it puts it in a quarantine stage, and then we have the false positive, which is like a drawback, and all that relevant stuff, right? So it's important that you are aware of these things. So the specific utility tool we are going to be studying today, inshallah, is defragmentation or disk fragmenter software. Defragmentation, fragmentation software, or disk fragmenter software, or disk fragmenter. Now, in the first glance, you might be wondering, sir, what type of software is this? This might be looking something very complex, right? But do you guys remember while we were studying chapter number 3, I told you guys one thing, that the magnetic drives have one problem, and it's like the disk sometimes gets lost because when we have these tracks, the tracks which we had in that magnetic drive, if we have some data present up here, then the next data is basically going to come up here, and then the next data is going to come up here, but it's basically going to be read in a way where it's going to be read using a circular head, right? So we said that if this part, this specific part, one of these many parts is talking about, like, let's say Fortnite, and then the next one is like WhatsApp, and then this is, let's say, RDR2, Red Dead Redemption 2, and then one of you out of nowhere decides on deleting the WhatsApp part, you're going to delete WhatsApp, but the problem is that this specific slot, this is now empty. Like nothing is stored in this place and you cannot replace it with anything. So because it was read using this specific read write or the head part, which moved circular in circular direction, it had to basically go through this whole path, including the useless empty place. And this basically resulted in extra time to be consumed, extra computers processes power to be consumed. And this was a drawback with the what do we call it, magnetic drives. But then we were like, even back then in chapter number 3, I told you guys that there is a solution to it, which is basically known as a disk fragmentation software or disk fragmenter. So what a disk fragmenter does is that if I basically open up this diagram, it's sort of in a way that we have basically the memory is like in this shape. Just assume it to be in this shape, but not like circular right now. And we basically have stuff like this. So it's basically the different sections. And then in one section, let's say we have Fortnite. And then in the other one, we had WhatsApp. And then in the third one, we had RDR2, right? So now if I have to copy the same model to display what just happened, we saw that we have a model like this, and then eventually it was basically replaced. Perhaps it was basically deleted. Oh, how do I copy it, man? We had an option to, oh, well, we had the option to duplicate it. Yep. So now we have one, and then let me duplicate it again so that I'm not required to do it again and again. Oh, we had it up here, my bad. So let me just drag this up here, done. So now what just happened was that this was the original state, okay? So this was the original part, the first diagram. You had Fortnite, then afterwards in the next sector we had like WhatsApp, and then in the next one we had RDR2. And so like the read head up here, it was reading everything side by side. But then what happened was you decided on deleting WhatsApp, deleting. And so once you deleted the WhatsApp part, it was like an empty slot left up here. But because this read write head was moving in like circular direction where it used to go in this way, like you see, if this is like the whole circle, this whole thing is the circle, and this part, the pen is the place where it can read. Even though if this part is empty, it's still going to go through it, right? Because it has to move in a circular path. And that means that we are useless for no specific reason, or for like useless reason, we are sort of wasting computer's power. But then what happens is that what a disk fragmentation software does is, one important point perhaps to note here is that even if this part is empty, sometimes students believe that, sir, if what if we open up some other application? So like what if I open up Google Chrome? So wouldn't this place be replaced with Google Chrome? No. The magnetic drive has this capacity buildings technique where what happens is that whenever you want to open a new app, it goes next to the previously opened app. So your Google Chrome is basically going to come up here, which is a problem. Why? Because you're literally wasting one slot which could have been used for some specific reason. Now what's happening up here? New app opened, new app open. But because there was this empty slot, literally you tell me, if you want to read something all the way from this point till this, isn't this going to be taking useless time just because you're going to go through this extra slot which is not even helpful? So what a disk fragmenter does is that disk fragmenter software basically sort of brings all these the next elements back to the first element by removing the empty slot. So this RDR2 part is basically brought up here, and alongside the RDR2, Google Chrome is brought next to it. So we basically remove the empty slot that was present. And now definitely if something was being read all the way from Fortnite to Google Chrome and it was originally taking like 5 seconds, now you can even see it from the diagram that now it's going to be taking less time because now it's occupied in a way where the memory allocated to each of them does not include any sort of empty space. So this last part would be after disk fragment. So that's the general and the basic model of what and how a disk fragmenter works. Now, how does it work? The main logic behind it is not taught to you guys and at this level, but you should be aware that it basically brings up all the next memory places back and connects it with the original first spot, and it basically removes any sort of empty place. And now what this happens is that now definitely if I wanted to run RDR2, you would have to know that originally it had to go all the way from this, it had to basically go all the way like this till this part, right? But now if I have this empty part being removed, if this empty part is being removed, like this part is no longer relevant to us, okay, we can do it, right? So let me just erase this. So now if I have the empty part being sorted up in the right way, you're going to note that I can run my RDR2 in this part, because now this place is going to occupy RDR2, and now you're going to note that it's going to only take this much time, whereas originally it had to go till this place. So this basically improves my computer's performance. Why doesn't the disk directly read Chrome instead of going through each and every one of these? It's not like this. So basically, let me just go back and share the picture with you guys. I feel like उस तरह आप लोग को बेहतर समझ आ जाएगी. Just give me a minute, guys. Let me share the picture with you guys from the book so that it's easier for you to understand. So how it works generally is that you have basically a magnetic drive which works this way, right? So we have tracks and sectors on it. This was the diagram I told you guys previously, right? This specific diagram. And in this diagram, we studied in chapter number 3 that how your data is basically read is that it includes a part, a head like this, which is basically connected on one side. And it has basically the power of reading whatever is beneath it. So basically, this can only read the data, whatever is basically beneath this. It cannot read other stuff. But our whole magnetic drive basically rotates. It rotates at a very fast rate. So like if there is something present up here, basically it's going to rotate unless it comes beneath this head, and then it's basically going to be red. So what I'm trying to say up here is that when your computer, how your computer works is that if this specific slot is of one memory location, right? So in this slot, let's say we had like Fortnite. And then in this one, we had, let's say, Google Chrome. And then in this one, we had WhatsApp. But now you're like, no, let me just delete Google Chrome. So you remove Google Chrome and this slot is now empty. But now, because the computer operates in a way that it goes ahead, now the next app, if you want to open, let's say YouTube is going to be automatically open in this place. It cannot be opened in this point because the memory cannot understand where did you remove it. So this part cannot be understood by the memory, by the hard disk, for it to automatically assign YouTube up here. Now, definitely, if I want you to basically read the YouTube part, and this rotation starts from here, so you're going to note that it has to go all the way till this point, right? Because it's rotating. But, or even if it's the other way around, if I have to say, let's say the YouTube or like if I want to say the Fortnite part is being rotated, so Fortnite right now has to be rotated this much to reach the head, right? But now what we do is that we basically make it more simplified using a disk fragmenter, where a disk fragmenter basically brings the other two part close together. So the WhatsApp part, oh my bad. So the WhatsApp part is basically brought next to Fortnite, like up here, and then my Fortnite part or the YouTube part is basically brought next to this place. And so I no longer have any sort of empty space left. And this allows the performance to improve, because now previously if I wanted to run YouTube, I had to go this much, because the whole head had to, or this disk had to rotate this much for the YouTube to be read. But now it needs to be only rotated this much. And this means that eventually I am basically saving this much time, the time it takes to from this place to this place. Now, even though it may seem like pretty small, but just imagine your computer has like thousands and millions and billions of operations happening at once. So like for thousands of operations, if we add up this small chunk of time, it's going to constitute in a very big value. And in computers, even nanoseconds can make a big difference. So we try to improve every possible aspect of the computer using these elements. Now, is it clear how a disk fragmenter generally works? Do you guys understand what it is and how it works? Perfect. Baki batai everyone quickly in the chat box. If it's not clear, let me know so that I can re-explain it to you. Perfect. Tosif, clear? Tosif? Perfect. All right, now we have seen how a disk fragmenter generally works. Okay, now we need to do the theoretical part, because definitely in exam you won't be making this diagram. This is for your own understanding. Now, to discuss that aspect of how it basically works and what you need to write in exams, so you should understand that what happens is that basically your files become scattered in tracks and sectors due to deletion. So when you delete the data, the files, the WhatsApp files or whatever the app which we deleted, let's call them files. Files are basically scattered. So like we have empty spaces in between. Files are scattered in tracks and sectors. What are tracks and sectors? It is basically these slots where the data is stored, right? Up here, you can see even in the diagram, this is the sector, this is the track, this whole space. And within this, like we're talking about this one specific slot. So like what happens is that when you delete the data, it basically, the data gets scattered in between. So the files become scattered in tracks and sectors due to deletion, expansion due to deletion, expansion, or partial deletion. We did discuss what deletion is. Let me also explain the other two parts for you to fully understand it. So what expansion is all about, and what if you want to have this much slot for your specific whatever function you want to do. Let's say you're writing some essay, so this is like some word related app, and then you need extra space, but your computer can allocate this whole slot, right? Your computer can allocate basically this one whole chunk for whatever task you need. So like you need extra data, it's going to give you this whole chunk. But now your essay only required this much part. So now you're making use of all this blue place for the essay, right? So it's basically making use of all this place. But now you're going to note that this place, which I'm just highlighting right now with yellow, this part is also allotted for the same purpose, but it's not being made use of. So now next time if I want to open YouTube, YouTube would not be opened in this partial place. Perhaps YouTube would be allotted a different full track for it. So YouTube is going to be opened up here. So now the same empty space is being left. So what this fragmented does is that it grabs the YouTube and it basically brings it up here. And what partial deletion means is that what if I want to delete some part of my essay, which means that I want to delete maybe like this much part. So we have like a small empty slot created in between. So now this empty space again created would be something where you need to basically bring them together, and this bringing them together to improve the performance is being done by your disk fragmentation software. And this is really important because if we do not make use of a disk fragmenter, what the problem is that your computer performance is going to drop rapidly, and if your computer performance drops, it's basically going to result in a lot of problems. So one other point to note here is that when we have these empty slots in between, like up here, like let's say we have these empty slots in between, we call this non-contagious. Contagious. Non contagious. Contagious. And now when they are basically in order, we basically say that they are basically what? They are in a contiguous form or contiguous sectors where they are basically next to each other. Contiguous form, because there is no gap in between them, right? Wherever we had something empty, it basically indicated that there was some gap in between them. So when there is no gap, like the way we have up in here, this is like after the disk fragmenter was used, we call it a contiguous form. So in exam, you need to make use of these two keywords because they are relevant and important for your answer. So what you're going to say is that this disk fragmenter, what it does is it basically improves and basically allows faster access time. Allows faster access time. Why? Because it does not need to basically go through the whole circle. Perhaps you get it, you basically reach the file whichever you're trying to reach earlier on, and this improves your performance. And apart from that, when fragmentation happens, or like fragmentation is basically this part where you make pieces, where you have some empty parts, some sort of partial deletion or some expansion. So this fragmentation scatters files, slows down the access speed, and then this defragmentation, what the defragmentation software does is it reorganizes the file. It reorganizes the file. And how does it reorganizes the file? It reorganizes the file into contagious form, which means that everything is basically next to each other. And when everything is basically next to each other, this improves or speeds up your hard disk performance, speeding up your HDD performance. So you're going to note that for improving your computer's performance, it's really important that you make use of this specific tool, because if you do not have this tool, now this is, remember, now this is a utility software, and a utility software comes under system software. Now you might be wondering, why is it a system software? It's basically a system software because you might never ever wish to download something like this on your computer, right? But the operating system or installed it automatically so that it can basically ensure that the memory access time is improved, because this is now going to improve the access time for the computer, and is going to allow the CPU to execute stuff in a faster way, and it's eventually basically going to improve the net performance. And that is what we want, right? So that is the main purpose behind why we have this disk fragmentation software. Apart from that, we don't have anything more to it. बस आपको पता होना चाहिए what it does, and it basically reorganizes the file, and that is the whole thing. Just the concept is something important which should be clear. Now I want you guys to kindly quickly let me know in the chat box, is this clear, the whole disk fragmentation software logic? Or if there are any questions, just let me know so that I can re-explain those that part to you. Perfect. बाकी बताएं. Ramin, Tosif, clear? Ramin, so Tosif, Ramin, quickly. Clear, or do you have any questions? All right, no problem, no problem. Tosif, clear? Perfect. All right, now we have seen basically two of the eight utility softwares. Now we're basically going to be looking into the third one, which is pretty much very, very easy, very simple, something being used almost in all the digital platforms at this point. Your WhatsApp makes use of it, and everything here and there does make use of of it. And it's basically known as a backup software. So what a backup software does is that it automatically backs up data. So you have Google Photos, it backs up your photos automatically. You have your WhatsApp, it backs up your data automatically. You might have something else, it's going to automatically be backed up. So what a backup software does is that it allows the scheduling for backing up files. The keyword scheduling. It allows the scheduling. The word scheduling here is important. Scheduling or backup files. And why do we say scheduling? Because you might have seen, if you ever open up your WhatsApp backup or whatever platform's backup, you're going to get a specific option to backup every 5 days, every 2 days, every 7 days, every 10 days, once a month, twice a week, or whatsoever, right? So basically, a backup software is that type of software which not only like backs up the file or like uploads it to a platform where you can re-download it later on, but also does it in a way where it could be scheduled for a specific time, once a week, once a month, or whatsoever. So, yeah, so that's why it's important that you write the keyword scheduling. Apart from that, you need to understand that it's basically what it does. What this software basically does is that it procedure on one of the following three devices. Now, generally, when we think about backup, it's like automatically getting uploaded to a remote, uh, what do we call, a drive, or maybe some remote server, right? But it carries out a backup procedure on one of the following three ways. Carries out carries out a backup process, on one of the three ways. Process on one of the three ways. What are those one of the three ways? The first way is basically when you can basically what you can do is that you directly back it up on the same hard drive or SSD you are using. So we're gonna say the one currently in use. What do I mean by this? It's basically एक सेकंड बता दो currently in use HDD or SSD. So like for instance, I say that one of you is basically working on a project, right? You're writing, is this the utility that says system restore points? Uh yeah, you're correct. Maybe, yeah, because it's the same thing. Or perhaps just a minute, let me see. Was it a bit different? Let me look up here. I guess it's the same one. Yeah, it's the same one. Yeah, it's the same one. Because yeah, it was the backup of the files part, and it basically ensures that your computer is being backed up at a specific at specific points, so that if you want to go back to a specific place or you want to re-access data again, you can basically access it. So Hassan Abdullah, your point of saying that, is it the utility that sets system restore points? Yes, it is. So like if you have a MacBook, you're going to see that it has a time machine named application, which is sort of a backup software. You can go to any restore point. Just like that, you might have some other sort of backup stuff where you can literally go to a previous version. Maybe you are updating the mobile phone and now you have the option to go back to the previous model. So you can basically restore back to wherever you want it to go. But wherever you want to go, it's important that that specific locations or that specific points data has been backed up and stored in one of the three ways which we are just discussing. So your data could either be stored on the hard disk or the SSD which you are currently using. So maybe you are upgrading your phone or updating your phone, and what happens is that you basically back up the data and it's stored within your hard disk or SSD. Or maybe I can say you're working on a project, and what the app of the project, whatever you're making the project on, what it does is that it basically saves the file in whatever folder you are working on, but at the same time it also saves it in like some other hidden part, so that, for instance, god forbids you lose the file, you can still access it through some other options. So that's like one way of how the backup softwares work, where it basically stores the backed up files in some other folder but within the same hard disk or the SSD which you are making use of. Then one other way of doing this is where you can basically have like an external drive connected to it, or I can say a locally backed up copy of data, a locally backed up backed up क्या बोलेंगे, locally backed up copy of data, copy of data on an external portable drive. So, and this is something which a lot of people do. They want to, what do we call it, store some sort of, like what happens is that during weddings here in Pakistan, you would have noted that post weddings, people literally have their own hard drives or maybe some sort of USBs, and they basically copy and back up all of that data in that specific drive. So in a lot of cases, what happens is that your computer has like a fixed sort of external hard drive connected to it the whole time, and then you make use of a backup software to automatically schedule the data, but it's not scheduled and it's not basically backed up on your own hard drive, but rather it's basically the data is being stored on an external portable drive. So this external portable drive could again be a hard disk, SSD, some a flash memory drive or whatsoever, but it basically stores the data externally. And that's the second way of basically how backupping softwares can basically back up your data. Whereas the third one is the one which we all are making use of most commonly. And that is where you can basically back up the data remotely. So a remote backup version could be created, stored away from the computer. Say, so we can say remotely backing up data on server, remotely backing up, backing up data on a server. So this one includes stuff related to Google Photos, your WhatsApp, your what do we call it, iCloud or whatsoever, whatever backing up softwares we have. So like if I have purchased iCloud right now, what's going to happen is that if I take an image, it's automatically going to back it up to the server. And now if I delete that image from my phone, it's still going to be there. So I can re-access it. Or if God forbids, what happens is that I mistakenly delete everything in my phone, I factory reset it, and I can still regain or re-get all the data because it was stored as a backup in my iCloud. So these are basically three ways of how a backup software can store the data once you turn on a backing up model. And what are a few features which you guys are required to know? So a few features of a backup softwares are that, if I have to list them up here, features. So firstly, the first feature you get while making use of backup software is that it allows you to restore data from the backup. So you want to restore the data, that is something which this app does, restore data from backup. Maybe you deleted something, but you can still access it. Point number one. Then, second feature you get while making use of what do we call it? This specific sort of backing up software is that it creates a restore point. With just Hassan Abdullah stated, it creates a restore point. Creates a restore point. And what do we mean by a restore point? It's basically the same way I can say that you want to go back. So like it's basically my computer. What's happening up right now is that if I turn on backup mode, it's automatically going to back up my data every week. And then at the end of my month, so like I can have an option like 7 Feb, then I can say 16 Feb, then I can say 20th Feb, and 1st March. At each of these dates, my computer's whole data is being backed up. And then at the end of the month, I have the option, if I want to go back to any of this stage, I can basically use the same backing up software. And it's basically going to bring all the data saved at 7 Feb onto my computer, and it's going to replace my currently stored data with this. And so I basically go back to whatever the last restore point was. So this might be a restore point. So if something goes off, I can basically restore it to the last point where I was basically storing all the data. So that's also one feature of a backing up software. And you have, like in Mac OS, we have like an application time machine which creates this restore point, whereas in Windows we have like a file history application. But generally, if I have to basically define what a backup software is, a backup software is basically every computer program that automatically creates and store copies of data, files, systems, or application, allowing the users to restore the data in case of loss, corruption, or damage. So automatically creates and store copies. ये भी लिख लेता हूँ, automatically creates and store copies, and later on allows them to be, and later on allows the backed up data to be what do we call it? This backed up data could be क्या बोलेंगे, restored. So allows the backed up data to be restored in case of any problems. In case of any problems, whether it's like something related to the data being corrupted, or maybe some security problem, or the hardware failure, or whatsoever. So this is basically what we call as a backup software, and this is the general working of a backup software. And this everything which we just discussed is relevant, and you all should be aware of it. Is it clear or not? Everybody in the chat box quickly. Perfect. Baki, everyone quickly. Great. To see if Ibrash clear. Good to go, Ibrash. Perfect. All right, now we have seen basically three of the eight. I know it's a bit long, but we need to understand it this way for all of them. So now we're going to look into the fourth. Now, what's the fourth one? The fourth one is basically known as a security system. It's basically that specific uh, computer system or that specific utility program which deals with ensuring that your computer is basically totally secure. Now it has like a general characteristics, like firstly it manages you, and it basically manages access controls and user accounts. Manages access controls and user accounts. So even though it may seem like when we open up a Windows computer and we have the password system set up in front of us, or we can basically, if we have like one computer but multiple people are using it, what we do is that we create users in them, right? User number A, user number B, and then we can set a password on each of them. While it may seem like that is something being done by the operating system, which is true, but within the operating system, this task is being managed by the security system. And the security system is what? It's like a utility software. So next time you open up and you basically log into your computer while entering the password, do know that you're basically working on a system software. And what type of system software? A utility type software. What type of utility software? A security system software. So your security system firstly does this. It manages access control, which basically means that you might have seen sometimes you have an account with the name of guest, and sometimes you have an account with the name of administrator. Now, the administrator account can basically deal with changing passwords, creating new user accounts, whereas a guest is only allowed to basically get to it just to use the computer generally. And likewise, user account means that you can create multiple accounts. Each one could have a different password, and it's basically working towards creating a better security platform for your computer. Then security system is also one other utility software that is linked to not only its own self, but it is also linked with other utility softwares. Linked with other utility softwares. With other utility softwares. And what type of other utility softwares? Like antivirus. So, because its whole purpose is to ensure that your computer is working, you can say that antivirus is basically the security guard, whereas security system is like the whole police department generally, or the head of the police department. It's basically overlooking everything, whereas antivirus would be one guard in it, right? Then next on, we have one other purpose, or maybe you can say a feature of the security system. And what it does is that it also protects network interfaces. We usually always ignore this, but protecting the network interfaces is really important. When we talk about network interfaces, we basically mean to say talking about the firewall. And we're going to discuss firewall in chapter number 5, and we also had like a small look onto it in chapter number 3 too, where I said that it's basically that one wall which stops any sort of external virus coming into your computer. So what's and who is managing this firewall? It's also the security system, which is basically a utility software. So if you did not have the security system, any sort of virus could have entered your computer externally. Whenever you're downloading something and it blocks that file from getting downloaded, remember, it's getting it blocked could have been an action done by the firewall. That is also the reason why a lot of you, when you basically download an application or a game on Windows, and you turn it on to play it like Fortnite or Minecraft, even on the local area network, you're going to see that a pop-up message comes up from the firewall and it says, oh, do you want to allow it? Basically, why does it ask you to basically allow it? It means that when you allow it, what happens is that it does not stop the data that is being transmitted between you and the other person, or whatever is being coming from that platform is automatically allowed. But if you block it, it basically never allows that data to be transmitted from this part to this part. It's basically a wall is set in between them, and we call that wall the name firewall. Now, more details about this in chapter number 5, so no worries at this point, but just have this general idea. Apart from that, your security system also works to ensure that your data is more secure, and when you're transmitting it, which means that it uses encryption and decryption to ensure data is not intercepted. Uses encryption and decryption to ensure data is not to ensure data is not understood and intercepted, not understood and intercepted and intercepted. Apart from that, your security system also deals with one other task, and the basic final task perhaps would be like, it is that specific system which tells your computer that, bro, a security update is here. Kindly update your computer so that we can basically bring in those security updates. Now, why are these updates necessary? We usually ignore them, right? So we always say that, yeah, why am I updating my computer? So it's really important that you update your computer. And why is it important? Because whenever you update your computer, what happens is that with every update, your computer basically gets new security features. So, like for instance, remember yesterday I said that the antivirus compares everything against a database. So now when you update your computer and it's like a security related update, what happens is that that antivirus database also gets updated. It has new viruses information, new way to prevent it, new way to basically delete them. And this is just going to improve the security of your computer. So like generally don't update the stuff directly, because a problem with direct updating to a newer operating version is that sometimes the newer version can include a lot of bugs or a lot of problems which can slow down your computers or the performance generally. So wait for like a month or so. So like if an iOS new version pops up, so like iOS 26, I waited for a few months to see whether there were a few bugs or not, and then there were, but the Apple basically worked on improving them. They solved them, and once I felt like, okay, bas ab kar lena chahiye, so then I updated it. So at that point I was less vulnerable to these problems than someone who might have been who directly updated it. But generally updating them and dealing with this updates related part is also something managed by the security system. And this marks the end of our fourth what do we call it utility program. The fifth one is basically something which was there back then, when I used to be a child, even though I'm not like abhi koi baba ya buddha banda. I'm like literally 19, but still, like when I was like 5, 6, I remember when we had Windows XP, there was a specific thing which we nowadays call as a screensaver. And what's a screensaver? You might have never seen a screensaver. Perhaps I haven't seen one on Windows 10 or Windows 8. But let me show you guys a picture. What happens is that previously, or even at this point, you would have noted that if your computer, let's say, is left idle for like 5 minutes, you're gonna note that your computer screen goes black. It goes black, right? It's you cannot see anything. That black image that comes up, it's why does that image come up? That specific image is brought up for a few purposes, like power saving, for security purposes, so that you, if you're not present, so if someone just wants to come in and alter your data, it basically brings that screen, after which you need to enter your password. What is that black screen called? It's basically known as a screensaver. So nowadays we only have like a screensaver which is just like a plain black image, but previously we used to have something like this. So you see this is like one of those images. So you might have like a bouncing DVD logo screen saver, in which if nothing is happening, you're going to see that it's basically a black screen with some sort of animation going on. And now this specific thingy which pops up on your screen when you basically, what you do when you basically leave your computer idle for a few points or a few minutes, is basically known as a screensaver. So now we're basically going to look into the same discussion, and we're going to highlight and understand what are some general features of screensaver. So what a screensaver does is that it's basically the program that displays a moving or a still image after a set period of computer inactivity. Program that displays a still. Now the one which we have nowadays, that's still, right? It's only a black image, nothing is moving in it. Or you can also have the moving one, which was there back in Windows 7, Windows XP. I'm not sure the why it's moved nowadays, but it's basically for one reason जो कि मैं आगे बताता हूँ, which might have been a reason for it. So it's like the program that displays still moving image after a set time of computer inactivity, after a set period या time of computer inactivity. Now, I hope so. It's pretty clear that it's the same image. Now, the next time you feel like you leave your computer for 5 minutes idle and you have the black screen, it's not like your laptop powered off or it like shut down or like it went into sleep. We can call it sleep, but like what happens is that the image which we have in front of us, which is literally just a black screen, that black screen is known as a screensaver. Now it's important that why was this necessary? Why was this necessary? It was basically necessary for one reason. Now, the original computers, the OG computers which we had, that those computers were basically operating using CRT monitors. And what are CRT monitors? CRT monitors are those old conventional monitors. Let me even paste a picture for you guys. But it's basically that monitor which included like a pretty back head, something like a काफी बड़े किस्म के होते थे, and something like this. So like, let me just show you the image. It's from this website slash gear, shout out to them, but something like this, right? So these was CRT monitors. And what these CRT monitors had one problem. When we basically used to use them, it had a phosphorus layer behind it. And this phosphorus was being burnt when we make use of the computer screen. So like if I'm not using it or when the user was inactive, to prevent the phosphorus burn on CRT monitors, computer programmers came up with the concept of screensavers. So we say to prevent the burn phosphorus burn on the monitor, on CRT monitors. And that was basically the original purpose of it. But nowadays, it's like also used. Now, the latest one which we have nowadays, the computer screens which we have like today, the LED one, they do not have this phosphorus issue. But uh, you would have noted that even at this point, we do have screensavers, like a black screen comes up. Now, why do we need it nowadays? Now, it's basically needed for a few reasons. Firstly, the foremost reason which comes into your mind is basically customization. A lot of people, they change their screen saving screens and they make it more customizable. Like if I have to show you guys this one other video, you're gonna see that it was pretty screensaver. There used to be one something like this. Yeah, so you see, just let me play it for you. Now, rather than having like an idle computer, you can have something like this, and you can like literally have pipes or maybe some sort of colors or whatsoever, but stuff is just moving here and there, and it's more appealing to watch rather than a black screen or something. So the first benefit we get is that we can basically make it more customizable, or I can say that the screensavers can be used for the purpose of customization. That's one use of why we are still having it. Apart from that, the second use which we get of it is basically security purposes. Why security purposes? Because you're not using it, you basically have the screensaver come up, and the screensaver, after you just get back to the computer, it requires you to re-enter the password. And so when you re-enter the password, it's you. Otherwise, if you're not using it and it's left like idle for 5 minutes, like literally anyone can come up onto your computer, right? So it's the second use. It's basically the security purposes one. The third one is that this screensaver also allows your computer to understand that you are not doing anything on it, and so any background task should be executed. What type of background task? Maybe run a whole antivirus scan, or maybe run some sort of defragmentation related software. to ensure that something is being, what do we call it, organized, the whole data is being organized in the right way. Or I can even say a better one could be backup, so that your data could be backed up. Because if you make use of antivirus while using the computer, this antivirus takes a lot of processing, and so a lot of power is going into the antivirus part, due to which when you start a full system scan while making use of the computer yourself, the computer's performance is going to get slowed down. And even this is like a task, if anybody of you do use an antivirus, start a full scanner, you're going to note that the computer gets slow. Why does it slow down? It's basically because this requires a lot of power. And then the last point, which I feel like is one other reason as to why even we have it nowadays, and might be one other reason as to why we nowadays only have a black screen, and that is that it saves energy or battery. So, like, rather than even have the animation which I just showed you, that is also going to take some sort of battery or energy, right? So, if we have just a black screen, it's going to save more energy. And that could be one other purpose as to why we might need a screen saver. So, the screen saver is also like one utility tool which you all should be aware of. Any questions, or are we good to go? Quickly, 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 so that I can do one next one too. बस I feel like we have one last left. Yeah, बस perfect, perfect. बाकी भी बताएं जल्दी जल्दी जल्दी, so we can do the last one and we are good to go. Perfect. Great, that's great to know. So now the last one which we basically need to discuss up here would be क्या कहते हैं, this in this we basically looked into this, we saw this one, file management, this file management, this disk repair. These are some sort of examples. But this anti-spyware part would be discussed in chapter number 5. This has been done, this has been done. This is basically, you can sort of call that this disk repair and analysis is somewhat merged with disk fragmenter. But at your level, this is not necessary. These two are more or less discussed more in AS level. So if you study AS level computer science, you're going to note that you will find more information about them. But just for the purpose of examples, we have them discussed up here. But now we're basically going to be looking into the last example of system software, which is a bit important for you all, and that is device drivers. So we're going to look into what device drivers are and what are they generally used for. Say, so device drivers. Now, this is not a utility software though, but still, it's an important concept which you all are required to be aware of. So a device driver is that software that enables communication between the operating system and the hardware. So a software, it is the software, it is the software that enables communication between the hardware or between the operating system and hardware. एक ही बात. Between the operating system and hardware, right? So we have like the hardware and the OS being used at the same point. And just like I explained previously, this device driver is that software, because definitely if I'm making use of a keyboard, the computer does not understand these keystrokes, which we basically these buttons which we are pressing again and again. Beneath this is just like some sort of, you can say, we had this one thing in Minecraft, I forgot, a piston, right? So it's not like the exact same piston, but you can see that when you press it, it basically gives it like a whole signal, because the circuit is complete and then we have a signal. But now a computer only understands zeros and ones. It does not understand the signals, the electrical signals that are being generated. So what basically converts and translates these electric current into zeros and ones? This specific part, this specific software which converts these electric current or the signals into a binary form is known as a device driver. Without a device driver, your software or your operating system in most cases do not your operating system can basically not understand what the hardware is trying to tell you. And so in that case, you would have seen sometimes when you download or install a new hardware, they give you an error, device not recognized. Why is it the device is not getting recognized? It's basically because your computer does not have a relevant device driver present to translate. I think you meant Redstone. No, not necessarily Redstone. I was basically talking about how when you step onto that whatever thing it was. I used to play Minecraft back then, but then your piston used to just come off, right? So I'm talking about keyboard, that pressure plate. Yeah, perfect, perfect. Pressure plate, bilkul. So we used to have pressure plate in Minecraft, which was sort of similar, that you step onto it, and beneath it, if we installed a piston, it's basically going to come up. So sort of similar. Just to explain it to you all, if you have a keyboard is somewhat similar to, you press apply the pressure using your fingers, and the moment you press them, it's like the piston, the button is completely going down and it's getting connected with the circuit, and because it's now in touch, the whole circuit is now completed, and when the circuit gets completed, electrons can flow and we have electric signals. So this could be called signals, or I can even call it current. And then this current is basically transmitted to zeros and ones thanks to the device driver. But if we don't have the device driver, the computer would, the operating system would not be able to understand what the hardware has to present to them, and in that case we call the error to be, or like the computer usually tells us, that the device is not recognized. Now, it's important to understand that your device drivers include some important information. This is something a lot of students are not aware of. Device drivers include, let me see if charging kitni hai laptop mein. Okay, we have 6%. I hope so we can complete it. Device drivers include some important information. Important information. What are the important stuff it basically includes? It includes data related to three main things. Three main things. The first one is that it includes the vendor ID, which basically means that the device driver is aware of who manufactured it, the manufacturer's ID. So if you look up to the device driver, they can tell you the details related to the manufacturer. Secondly, it can basically store detail related to the product ID. So it basically is aware of the specific ID or the serial number of whatever product you have, or I can say the specific device model, right? Specific device model. Whereas the third thing your device driver is usually aware of, it's your serial number, and a serial number is the unique identification number, which uniquely identifies your device, right? Your hardware. So and unique identification number. Apart from this, you should be aware that your what do we call it? These device driver. When we talk about serial numbers, these serial numbers basically also have descriptors in them. And what are descriptors? Descriptors are basically that part which includes the metadata about the device. So we have a specific thingy known as a descriptor. A descriptor is also included. A descriptor is also present, which stores the metadata. And now what's a metadata? A metadata is sort of like the extra data regarding some file. So like about the device, if I want to store some sort of extra information, when was it manufactured, what's the, or like if I have to generally define what metadata is the extra information that is basically stored within the data that tells us something about the data. Say that basically explains where the data is, what the data is, where the data is stored, what time was it created. So like if you look up, like let me show you guys one image, उसमें आपको बता दूं metadata of an image. So sometimes when you right click on your picture, you can basically access the properties, right? Have you guys ever seen that? You can basically access the properties, and those properties tell you a lot of important stuff. So it can basically tell you, like for instance, this image right now which I have in front of me, which I'm just trying to copy onto the screen. This specific image, or बल्कि नहीं नीचे नहीं ला सकता, Control X, Control V. Uh, I guess we can't. Never mind. So because we cannot, that's a different story. But right now you're going to see that this extra information that we have up here, the brightness value, the color space, this is basically extra information, right? Extra information info about the file. And any sort of extra information that's present about a file, it's basically known as metadata. Now, this is important and you should be aware of it, because a question can come up, and I have seen something related to this too. What's metadata? Extra information about the data. Extra info about the data. So that is something very useful and important too. And this basically marks the end of our important sort of devices, software, sorry, which you all should be aware of. So we looked into a few utility related softwares. We saw what they are. Then we also looked into one sort of other thingy, which we call as a device driver, and what it is, and what basically, so like these all USB device drivers. Right, so this descriptor which I said, this is basically a collection of information about the USBs, or about the devices. Collection of info about the devices. So it's important that you are aware of these definitions too, because this is something which the examiner loves asking in exam. And this basically marks the end of our chapter number 4.1.1. And inshallah, tomorrow we are going to be, or not tomorrow, I would be announcing, like, we will be having an extra class though, but it's going to be on Sunday. Let me give you guys a break. So, not today, inshallah, on Sunday, we will be having an extra class. And in that, we would be basically looking into what an operating system is. And then in that operating system, we're going to look into the functions, the features it has, and how they are being executed. And then basically once done with that, we just have a small part left with programming IDEs, and then inshallah the chapter would be completed. Uske baad zyada cheezein nahi included. But that marks the end of our today's discussion. Are there any question related to all these stuff which we just discussed, or are they fully clear? Quickly in the chat box. Any questions, anything? Okay, that's great to know. If you have no question, then that's it for today. Inshallah, see you guys on Sunday. I'll share the more information in the group. So do have a look at that, and do join in on Sunday too, so that you don't miss out. And that's all for today. Okay, take care, everyone. Allah Hafiz.